Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this webinar series being organized by the Open Access India. Today we have Vinodh ILANGOVAN. He is the Max Planck Society's ambassador for Open Access, and he is also a researcher at Max Planck Institute for Biochemistry. Today he'll be speaking upon on the theme of this year's Open Access Week, Open in Action. But that is being targeted. This talk is targeted towards the early career researchers. Dr. Vinodh, over to you, please.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful that Dr. Sridhar Gutham and Open Access India made me come here for this webinar. I'm happy to join here. And yeah, as he mentioned, I'm actually not from Max Planck Institute for Biochemistry, but I'm from the biophysical chemistry that's in Göttingen, in Germany. So this talk will be targeted on early career researchers for Open in Action, which is the theme of this week, but not from the perspective of someone who's outside, but from the insider's perspective, because I myself is an early career researcher. And I'll just go through what I actually do for my daily day-to-day life. So I'm trained as a biomedical scientist. So as I said, I work at the Max Planck Institute in Göttingen. And I look at biological clocks in Drosophila, like sleep-wake cycles and so on. So this is what I'm trained to do as a scientist. But apart from that, within the Max Planck Society's network and also within the institute, I'm involved as an Open Access ambassador, and then also as a specialist at Faculty of 1000, which is an open access publishing platform for biomedical science researchers, and also at a preprint service, which is ASAP Bio. Being an advocate of open science and being an early career researcher, it brought me to OpenCon 2016. I'm also one of the organizing members of this conference. This is just not a conference, but it's a big community where everyone who is concerned about open could join, because OpenCon has year-round events, one of which is a satellite event that will be held in Ranchi next month. Apart from being the member of organizing committee of OpenCon, I'm also happy to join the advisory board of Open Access India. And so far I've been telling what I've been uniquely doing as a researcher and then caring about open. If you all care about open, now you can take the action, because you could register for ORCID, which is a researcher identifying system. It's just 3 steps. You have to register, you have to fill in your details, and then use ORCID, which is a unique identification system for researchers, which connect research with the particular researchers. So if you do that, then you're already taken the first action for this week, which is putting open into action. So now I would actually focus a bit on the I don't want to rant about the journal, the publishing industry, but just to mention, this is a slide from Jill Ciresella, where we're summarizing what the problem exactly is and why do we need open access. Because the money that is funded to the researchers comes from public or taxpayers' money, which is more than 80% of it in most cases. And then it doesn't circulate, as in the cycle of scholarship is somehow broken, because the publishers are blocking the way to access research materials for the researchers. So unless we make this available for people who would need it, most probably the students and researchers, then we are not going to make this cycle of scholarship very efficient. So this is just not a problem just at some places, but it is everywhere, as you could see from the open access button. If you log into this open access button, and then if you are denied an article or access to any research scholarly published material, then you could hit on this open access button, and then this would give numbers of times people had hit on a paywall. And this is already suggested that not having access to research is not just at one particular place, but it's everywhere. So what can we do for that? As an early career researcher, how would you make your things known to the world? The solution is we could go open. As you could see from this figure, it all looks bright and nice, but is it actually very bright and nice? Because the moment somebody says you can go open, there are always concerns from early career researchers, because within the traditional academic system of both publishing and evaluation, we are taught to believe that if you are open, then probably you're risking your career. This is what most people are concerned about. And during the course of time, I will tell you that all of this is just a myth, because it has not been openly practiced by many people to even understand the potential of the success with openness. So usually early career researchers care, or they fear that if they go open, probably their work might be hiding, and which is very less visible, or maybe the impact factors are low, maybe the peer review quality of this open access journal will be of low quality. Probably they wouldn't get a job, and publishing in open access is going to be pretty expensive. And all of this is just a myth. The first myth is being or publishing open makes you hide or makes your work hidden. That's not true, because the moment your work is openly accessible, more people could read it, and the more people read that, then they produce more scholarly. The life cycle of the scholarship is continued, and hence your research is cited too often, and hence it boosts the impact of the research itself. So this is just a pie chart showing the citation advantage that was done in different studies. Although there were some controversial studies which shows no citation advantage, or there wasn't really a citation advantage with open, but you could see that almost close to 50% of the studies done on this shows that citation advantage is very clear when you go open. So the next action that you could do is, if you are writing a manuscript or you are planning to submit something very soon, then you could just go for an open access journal. So that would make the next action which you would commit for openness. But is this the only visibility that you get? Actually not, because the real impact that your research creates is not just only for researchers, but also for science journalists and in the social media and so on. So if you look at different metrics such as altmetrics, then you could already realize the potential of that openness has to offer. And then if you want to publish in open access journals, then as you would have already noticed from this webinar series, that the directory of open access journals are the best way to go through. If you're unfamiliar with that, there are also other methods such as using the tool and cofactor, where you could select for your field of research and what kind of open access you need, and what there are different parameters that you could play around with, and then select for few open access journals or in your particular field of research. If you wouldn't be able to do both of these, the best way is to just ask your colleagues around or librarians and mentors about the open access journals that are available in your field. If you aren't able to find such thing, then it's best that you create something using these two tools, the directory of open access journals or cofactor tool, and then create this list and then share it with your colleagues, your mentors, your collaborators, and so on. So that would again make you commit to the action that you would carry forward for openness. So is it all about just finding the suitable journal for open access publishing? It is actually not, because most people think that it's a myth that publishing open access has to be always expensive, because article processing charges, or the APCs, are the prime model on which open access journals are based on. But if you want to go open access, you can also reposit your author copies on your disciplinary repositories or institutional repositories. And if you want to get more feedback on your work, you can also post preprints, which are getting very popular these days. And yet another thing which is fast developing is the open platforms. The recent one that was established by Wellcome Trust in collaboration with Faculty of 1000, where research is done and then immediately published openly so that everyone could access it, and more discussion on that particular research could come along. So if you want to go green, that's one way, but if you want to still go for gold open access, there are different methods where you could be cost effective, such as if you go for journals like Rio Journal or F1000 Research. They have service-based charges, because they don't charge the same amount of money for every service that you would use, especially in Rio Journal. And in F1000 Research, not all the journals, you can publish different kinds of articles, such as negative reports or antibody validations and so on. So based on that, the costs are waived or reduced, and depending on which part of the globe you are from, you could have a reasonable price that you could pay. The next would be the usual journals which are having some fee waivers, or there are low cost but high quality journals such as PeerJ, Frontiers, and so on. So you could choose among one of these, either by your equation of what sounds better for your own particular field, or going back and forth with the DOAJ lists and then figuring out for your own particular field. And so yet another thing that I wanted to talk is, if you are repositing your own author copy, then you need to be sure, because many people ask if that is even possible, because you give away all your rights as an author to some publishers. But you can, in most of the cases, around 80% of the cases, if you are submitting your articles or manuscripts to all access journals, then you can actually come back and reposit your own self-archiving copy at institutional or disciplinary repositories, which is a green way of open access. But for certain reasons, if you want to know much more about what rights you can give as an author, then you could look into the Spark author addendum. So if you send this along when you submit a manuscript to a all access or non-open access journal, then most of your rights are preserved. So it's up to you as an author to know what kind of rights you have when you submit your research manuscript, and then take that into your hands and then wear openness in your sleeves by self-archiving. So the next myth that sorry, is there any question? Hello?
No, go ahead. I think somebody has just.
All right. So the next myth that I wanted to burst during this webinar is that the peer reviews in open access journals are usually of poor quality. This is actually not true. Although there are some studies that are published saying that the peer review is not very good in some of the open access journals, the caveat of those studies are that they did not compare open access journals versus the closed access journals, or it was not a very well controlled study, and hence it has to be taken with a pinch of suspicion. But on the other hand, there are open access journals that do open peer reviewing, which means you know who is reviewing your manuscript. In this way, the person who's going to review a manuscript is not biased because everybody else is also looking into that. And hence, this creates a high quality peer review where you are criticized for what you have to be criticized, and you have been constructively given comments on how to improve certain aspects of your manuscript. So most open access journals do open peer reviewing, and the ones that are listed here are actually doing open peer review. And open peer review also serves as an educative material for early career researchers and students to understand how peer reviewing process is done, and to also understand why this particular article has been accepted in this journal, and what kind of improvements have been happening from the time when the article was submitted until it was accepted. So this serves as a very good, valuable tool, and it is really, really recommended that all of our disciplines should move forward on open peer review, which is advantageous both for the authors as well as the peer reviewers in order to claim credit of their work. So the next myth that we are going to look into is the holy myth of impact factor, which is happening something like a very big worship, because people who wanted to publish in open access journals are afraid that they will not have enough impact factors. Although impact factors are not an article level metrics, but it's a journal level metrics, which is useful for the librarians to subscribe to those journals and not for the researcher to decide whether to submit in this journal or not. So if you are still concerned about impact factors, these are some of the impact factors for the open access journals, which are fairly incountable numbers, where if you would publish, you wouldn't risk anything. So this again is to reiterate the point that open access is not compromising anything with the quality of research. So the next point is, if you publish in open access journals, probably you will not get a job, you will not get a tenure, or you will not get grants. That is not actually true, because there is the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, which states that your openness will be taken into account, which means you're not evaluated based on impact factors. So the holy grail of impact factors are gone. You're evaluated based on your research output. All of your research output is taken into account of this. So San Francisco, if you haven't heard of this, just go visit San Francisco Declaration of Research Assessment, and please do sign either as an individual or take this up to your institutions, and then make sure that they sign it as institution. So the good thing about signing of San Francisco Declaration of Research Assessment is that in India, the Department of Biotechnology and also the DBT Wellcome Trust Alliance had signed in, which are one of the major grant sources for biomedical sciences. And there are also other smaller institutions that had, along with the Open Access India movement, which had signed the declaration, which is a very good move, actually, to start with. If you if you still do not fall into the category of biological sciences, and if you want to still look into what else you could do, probably you could convince your peers and the whole community to pressurize the funding agencies to sign for this particular declaration, so that it helps the researchers as well as the publishers. And in order to do that, you can look into the funders policy using this particular tool, which is Sherpa Juliet. And as I already mentioned, if you want to care about openness and then still be successful in an academic research career, one has to change the process of research evaluation, which has been so far done with unmeaningful matrices such as impact factor. So one way to do is to help help sign in or help share certain documents of your institution in this particular link, which is a project on assessing current practices in review, tenure, and promotion, headed by Dr. Yuan Pablo, and in collaboration with Erin McKinnon and Meredith Niles, who are all early career researchers who had been very successful while they had one open on their sleeves. So yeah. So now we come to how you can commit to putting open in action. So as early career researchers or a PhD student or a postdoc, you can initiate this dialogue of openness with your supervisor, your collaborators, your colleagues, saying that what advantages openness could bring. And most often it has been a myth that open access or being open will risk your career or funding opportunities, but that is actually not true. If you care about open, you should actually stand for it and get people together in the community and then make this change. So if you're interested in knowing more about openness, you can join events of OpenCon, such as satellite events, or we can, all the year round, there is some kind of community activity such as webcasts or calls or open science meetups and so on. So you could just go into OpenCon community, the link is given here, and then make sure that you are part of this community and embrace openness very much. I think I would stop over there and then take questions if there are. And I thank everyone for your kind attention.
Thank you, Vinodh. Yesterday there was a suggestion, but I failed to implement that one. We wanted to have the introduction of the attendees. So now, like, who's having the question, they may introduce themselves and then pose the question.
Yes, that would be great. Is there a question that I'm not able to hear, or?
Lena, do you have any question? Now it is unmuted. All mics are unmuted now.
Oh, yeah. So I think I saw the question, which is how does ORCID helps open access? So ORCID probably doesn't directly help open access, but in one sense, if you make your work open and then you have an ORCID ID, then all of this is integrated together. So with the researcher information, you could then find all of the research that is done by this particular researcher at one particular place. So it's something like unique identification of the researcher, but then it gives an idea of the kind of research that's being done. For example, if you self-archive something, usually Google should be able to find it, but just in case for some reasons, if it's not able to find, then you could actually import all your metadata, like whatever you have published, to ORCID, and then it helps the researcher more visibility.
It will differentiate between the researchers. Like in many of the times, like you can find there are some weak casing. Many times weak casing in agriculture science, weak casing in medicine, weak casing in physics. So how you differentiate the papers written by weak casing? So if you have this ID, it will differentiate between the authors. So it's ID for your
Exactly.
authorship.
Yeah, this is one of the main purpose of ORCID, to differentiate between the authors who had contributed particularly in certain fields, but for the populous reasons, names usually are repeated. So which often case is happening usually in India, which I could already see. Yeah, that way ORCID really helps. Well, yeah, if it directly helps with OA, it's kind of indirect. Yes, I agree. Um, but the indirect actions that we take somehow affect things at the end. So it's like if you have to walk, then you probably have to fall. Without falling, you wouldn't walk. Probably that's not the best analogy, but something similar to it. So ORCID helps open access in a way that all the open access platforms then require your ORCID ID so that it can then synchronize with it. So that's some way where I could see it directly helps. Maybe someone who is who has expertise with ORCID must correct me if I'm wrong.
Vinod, I have a question on the preprints.
Yes, sure.
How it works in the sense, I mean, in physics, it was since long time it was there, and then archive is the most popular preprint server. So nowadays we have the bioarch and the one which on you are saying ASSP.
Yeah, it's a file. Yeah.
Yeah, and when we as a community, we are also planning for starting an agri Xive for the agriculture domain. We talked to the archive and they have given the license to use the Xive XIV as a suffix to the agri or anything, and Center for Open Science using the open framework. They are lending their services, the server for hosting this agri Xive preprint server. But I just wanted, like when I post this question in different platform and I didn't get the answers. So how it is working like now, the journal, like when I make my manuscript, I'll be submitting to the preprint server, and there it undergoes the peer review, open peer review, and finally it gets into a shape, and it will be accepted by the journal, or the journal which is working with those preprint server, or any of journals. I can send it. How now it is happening?
Yeah, it's actually a very nice question. Yeah, I didn't actually talk in detail about preprints because that's probably not within the scope of, because it can be one separate webinar. But I just briefly wanted to mention that it was in 1990s that archive became popular for physics, and then recently, I mean, it has taken close to 2 decades for biologists to embrace such a kind of preprinting services. And now we have different preprinting services in biology. For example, PeerJ has one, and then we have one bioarchive, which is from the Cold Spring Harbor. And then we want, now the dialogue is also about creating a central preprint services, at least for biological sciences. And it's also good that you mentioned for agricultural research, there's going to be one more preprint server. And if I'm not wrong, there is also one for the chemistry, which should have already started in August this year. So the way preprints usually work is you submit your manuscript there, and then it's immediately openly available to the community or to anyone who could have access to internet. So it creates or increases visibility. So the moment it goes in, the scientific community actually evaluates, or like your peer community anyway, evaluates your research. In this case, it's just not those 3 anonymous reviewers or known reviewers, but the whole community is doing that. And then by the time this particular preprint that one submits becomes accepted in one journal, there is already citations that are happening for this particular research, or like this particular manuscript, or the preprint, let's say. So this already shows some kind of the process that's happening within research, that the moment things are seen as valuable, it's taken and it's being cited. And this citation advantage even prolongs for a while. So there are certain preprint servers which do this, which take into account of the open peer reviewing that's happening over there, and then incorporate into their own journal, for example, PeerJ. But there are some other cases where the journal editors, or they look into these articles, and then they communicate with the authors in order to send this manuscript for their journals, which is actually a good move. This is what we want for the researchers, right? So it's kind of a mixed model that's right now happening. As far as I know, the usual services in biological sciences is they have the preprint servers, and then the feedback is taken up by the authors, and then they work on it, and then it ends up in the journal, and then it gets indexed. So here the key point is to get it indexed, then it goes into the journal. But otherwise, it's already incorporated into the scientific community, because it gets into the thinking of the community, where how this can be incorporated into their own research, and then they already start citing it. So this is something that has to be seen as positive. And yeah, I think there's still a lot to debate on preprints among the community, and then whatever each disciplinary community feels how they had to go about it, I think that's the way to go forward.
Thank you, Vinodh.
You're welcome.
Lina, now can you talk? Rajshekhar? If no more questions, then let me final check, like, is there any chat, folks? Yes. Yes.
like there are no questions. It's almost like more informational. There are a lot more to learn. So it's like, yeah, thanks. It's very interesting.
You're welcome. Thanks for the feedback.
Okay, now I thank on all the behalf of the attendees and from the Open Access India, Dr. Vinodh for delivering such a nice webinar for the early career researchers on how to on the open access. Friends, tomorrow we have another webinar in the series from Jamila from Lebanon. She'll be speaking about open access in Arab countries. The same time at around 2 p.m. it will be there. Thank you very
Thanks.
much
Yeah.
for attending this webinar. Signing off.
Thank you very much for joining.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you, Vinod. Thank you.